Have you ever noticed that two people can say the exact same sentence, but one is taken seriously and the other is not? Here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't just hear accents, we judge them. And those judgments shapes classrooms, job interviews, and entire life chances. Today, we're unpacking the psychology behind accents and perceived competence, and why this matters deeply for ethnic families, educators, and policymakers. I just want to shout out this video to a really good friend of mine who came up with this topic. She works at a university and she told me about her parents and how they have accents. And that reminded me of my own mother, who went to job interviews and came home crying sometimes because she said that her English is broken or that she has an accent, even though she was highly qualified and highly competent for the role. And this got me thinking, I want to do more research on this and how we can change our perception around accents and this impacting the DEI within corporations. So here's the hidden bias that we don't admit. Accent bias is one of the most socially acceptable forms of discrimination. People rarely say it out loud, but research shows that they feel it. A major study in applied linguistics found that speakers with non-native or non-prestige accents were consistently rated as less intelligent, less credible, or less competent, even when their actual performance was identical to native speakers. And this comes from the Oxford Academic. This isn't about ability, it's about perception. And perception, especially in education, becomes reality. Teachers may unknowingly call on certain students more, employers may assume someone as less capable, and policymakers may overlook the structural barriers created by linguistic prejudice. Accent bias is not a small issue, it shapes opportunities. I also had another friend, completely intelligent, capable, and a pure academic who has a PhD. In her home country, she was a lecturer and she was winning at her field. But when she came here, because of the accent of the language barrier, people would perceive her as less competent, even when she had so much knowledge to contribute to the research or to a meeting. And that can knock someone's confidence drastically, even though that they may be even more competent than the people on their team to contribute to that project. So why do our brains do this? Psychologists explain this as accent bias, and this has two major mechanisms. The first is processing fluency. Our brains prefer what feels easy to process. When an accent is unfamiliar, the brain has to work harder and mistakes that effort for the speaker being less competent. This is called process fluency bias. The second is stereotyping and social categorization. Accents act as social signals. They tell us when someone might they tell us where someone might be from, their community, or their education and their status. And the brain loves shortcuts. Studies show that listeners often make snap judgments about intelligence, trustworthiness, warmth, and competence within milliseconds of hearing an accent. These judgments are automatic, but they're not accurate. They trigger our heuristics, which is our mental shortcuts. A 2024 study found that listeners' attitudes, familiarity with accents when they haven't heard something before, or whether they have heard something before, creates confirmation biases. And even the race of the speaker influenced how strong or intelligible the accent was perceived to be. In other words, we don't hear accents neutrally. We hear them through our biases. And this can make or break your organization's company culture. So what are the consequences in the real world? Accent bias shows up everywhere. So for example, in schools, students with regional, working class, or immigrant accents are more likely to be underestimated academically. They are more likely to be labeled as EAL or even be put in bottom sets just because they have an accent. In job interviews, meta-analytic evidence shows that accented speakers are systemically rated as less employable even when they're equally qualified. In healthcare, patients often trust doctors with certain accents more than others, even when the care quality is identical. So how about in leadership? People associated standard or prestige accents with authority, confidence, or competence. Accent bias is not about language, it's about power. So, what's the myth of the professional accent? Many ethnic parents tell their children, speak properly, sound professional, or lose your accent. But here's the truth, there is no such thing as a neutral accent. Every accent is shaped by the culture, geography, and identity of the place that you're living in. The idea of a professional accent is simply the idea of a dominant group's accent being treated as the standard. And when we teach children to erase their accents, we're teaching them to erase that part of themselves. So, what does the research actually teach us? Here's the twist, accent has no correlation with intelligence, capability, or competence. In fact, studies show that when listeners are given objective performance data, accent bias decreases dramatically, competence becomes visible, and bias loses power. A replication study in Brazil found that when speakers demonstrated strong job relevant performance, accent bias weakened significantly. Performance speaks louder than pronunciation. Your value, your excellence, the way you carry yourself will speak louder than the volume of your accent. So, must we as educators and policymakers do? If we want fairer classrooms and workplaces, we must train teachers in linguistic bias. Accent bias affects grading, expectations, and behavior management strategies. The second is to normalize accent diversity in schools. Representation reduces bias. Children should hear teachers, leaders, and professionals with a range of accents. Exposure reduces prejudice. And the third is to challenge the standard English as a gatekeeping tool. Teach clarity, not conformity. And the final one is to build policies that protect linguistic diversity. Accent discrimination should be recognized as a legitimate barrier to opportunity. So, what can parents do? Ethnic parents, this part is for you. Celebrate your child's accent, it's part of their identity. Expose them to diverse voices in media. And teach them that competence is shown through clarity and not imitation. And remind them your accent tells your story. It does not limit your success. This came from an interesting conversation that I had with my good friend when we said that when we go to other countries, we just expect everyone to speak English because it is the most dominant language and the most universal language that everyone learns. But do we actually go out of our way to learn the native language of the place? So if I went to East Asia, if I went to Japan, Korea, or China, am I willing to learn a few phrases in Japanese and Korean? Or even when I go back to my native country, do I just expect everyone to speak English to me, or do I actually put effort in to actually speak my mother tongue? And if I speak my mother tongue, sometimes it's broken. Sometimes I feel shameful or intimidated because I don't get certain words. And do other people make fun of me for that? And it's just like if I lived somewhere else in a different geographic location or a different demographic, would things be different? Would my accent still be considered the dominant one? Or would it be considered just even inferior to the other ones because I'm not a representation of the demographic that I'm in if I move. So it's really interesting how the place that you grow up can really shape you and to shape your performance and your outcomes as well, and the metrics that you're judged by. So accents are not a measure of intelligence. They are a map of where we come from, not where we can go. If we want a world where every child is judged by their ability and not their accent, we must challenge our biases, we must reshape our systems, and we must rewrite the narrative. So, if this message resonated with you, and if you found the research interesting, let me know in the comments down below. And if you are looking for a speaker in your schools, your organization, and your universities about equality, diversity, inclusion, and about policy, leave me a message on LinkedIn and we shall be in touch. So, this is the channel where we build not just more inclusive and courageous generations, but where we pave the way to think differently, to think more innovatively, and to diversify our perspectives through psychologically backed research. So, follow for more tips on inclusion, diversity, and equity. And until next time, bye.